Lemon's secret: don't mix with these foods. Ava was 71, the kind of woman who still prided herself on waking up early to tend her little garden behind the house. Her days had a comforting rhythm: a glass of warm lemon water at sunrise, a few stretches by the window, and a light breakfast before feeding her roses. She believed lemon was her secret to staying healthy, something she'd been told countless times in articles and TV programs. But one quiet morning, as she bent down to trim a rosebud, a sharp cramp gripped her lower back. It wasn't the kind of stiffness that comes from sleeping wrong. It was deeper, radiating toward her side, and it stopped her in her tracks. By midday, the ache hadn't gone away. Ava brushed it off at first, telling herself she'd simply overworked in the garden. But the next morning, the discomfort was sharper, and this time she noticed her stomach felt unusually heavy, her appetite low. She found herself leaning against the kitchen counter, a slight wave of nausea creeping in after her usual breakfast. Yogurt topped with a drizzle of lemon juice and honey. That's when her daughter, visiting for the weekend, insisted they make an appointment with the doctor. Sitting in the clinic, Ava recounted her routine to me: her lemon water, her healthy meals, her belief that citrus was her daily shield. I listened, nodding, because I knew her story all too well. Many of my patients, just like Ava, held on to these habits with the best of intentions, never realizing how certain food combinations could quietly work against them. Her blood work showed mild anemia, and a scan revealed small calcium deposits in her kidneys, the early signs of stone formation. She looked at me in disbelief, as if I'd just told her the sun was bad for the garden. "Ava," I said gently, "lemon is not the enemy. But sometimes, the way we use it can tip the balance in the wrong direction." I could see the worry in her eyes, the guilt starting to creep in, as though she'd brought this on herself by trying to be healthy. I reminded her that this wasn't about blame, it was about understanding her body's changes with age and making small adjustments that could protect her from pain in the future. Over the weeks that followed, Ava and I worked together to shift her habits. We kept the lemon in her diet, but learned which foods to avoid pairing it with, and when to have it so it would help rather than harm. Slowly, her energy returned. The heaviness in her stomach faded, her backache eased, and she was back in her garden, laughing at how much brighter the roses looked now that she could stand tall again. I often think about Ava when I see seniors clinging to routines they believe are safe, not knowing there's a hidden edge to them. Sometimes it takes a cramp in the back, a restless night, or a trip to the doctor to reveal the truth. But once you see it, once you understand how a simple change can lift the weight from your days, you never go back. It was a soft, golden morning when Ava carried her breakfast tray to the little table by the window. The steam from her tea curled upward, carrying a hint of lemon, and the bowl of yogurt in front of her looked like something from a magazine, topped with blueberries, drizzled with honey, and brightened by a splash of fresh lemon juice. It was her favorite ritual, one she'd been doing for years without a second thought. But as she lifted the spoon to her mouth, a faint twinge bloomed low in her belly, not painful enough to make her stop, but enough to make her shift in her chair. She brushed it off, thinking it was just her stomach waking up slowly. By the time she finished, though, a strange heaviness lingered. She leaned back, pressing her hand lightly against her ribs as if she could soothe it away. Outside, the roses swayed in the breeze, but Ava didn't feel like tending to them. That was unusual for her. She'd always been the kind of woman who thrived on movement. A little ache or stiffness never stopped her. Yet here she was, settling into the couch with her tea, hoping the odd fullness would pass. She didn't know it then, but that morning's healthy breakfast had just set off the chain of events that would change her daily habits forever. Later that week, the symptoms began to whisper a little louder. She noticed that every time she paired lemon with her yogurt, her stomach seemed slower, heavier, and her energy dipped. Her daughter, visiting from the city, pointed it out over lunch. "Mom, you're quieter than usual. You okay?" Ava forced a smile and waved it off, not wanting to sound dramatic over what she thought was just a little indigestion. But deep down, she was starting to wonder if something wasn't quite right. One afternoon, as she was folding laundry, the ache returned, this time sharp enough to make her pause mid-step. She stood there for a moment, holding onto the edge of the ironing board, trying to will the discomfort away. It was a familiar kind of stubbornness. Ava had always believed in pushing through, trusting her body to work things out on its own. But this time, her body was sending her a different message. That night, she finally mentioned it to her neighbor, Mrs. Caldwell, who had once been a nurse. They sat on the porch with their tea, the evening air cool and still. Mrs. Caldwell listened carefully, her brow furrowing slightly. "It might be worth having that checked," she said gently. "Sometimes it's not the food itself, it's the combination." Ava tilted her head, curious. She'd never heard of that being an issue. Lemon and yogurt had always sounded so clean, so good for digestion. But the seed of doubt had been planted. When she finally agreed to see me, I could tell from the way she described her routine that she was genuinely puzzled, even a little betrayed by her own habits. As I listened, I thought of how often I'd seen this pattern. Seniors trying to nourish themselves with foods they'd read about or seen on health programs, not realizing that age changes the way the body responds. I didn't tell her to give up lemon. Instead, I promised we'd figure out how to keep it in her life without letting it work against her. Ava kept up her morning routine for another week, still pairing lemon with yogurt, but the unease in her stomach began arriving earlier and staying longer. By the fourth day, it wasn't just heaviness, it was a lingering sourness in her throat and an odd, hollow fatigue that followed her through the morning. She found herself skipping her midday walk, something she almost never did. Even watering her roses, the task she loved most, felt like a chore. There was a quiet frustration in her movements, like a dancer trying to keep the rhythm while the music kept faltering. Her daughter noticed the change during Sunday brunch. "Mom, you look pale," she said, reaching over to squeeze Ava's hand. Ava laughed it off, blaming it on a restless night, but the truth was harder to admit. She was starting to dread her breakfast, yet couldn't bring herself to believe something so good for you could be the cause. After all, hadn't she read countless times about the benefits of probiotics and vitamin C? Weren't they supposed to help digestion, boost immunity, and keep her energy steady? When she finally came into my clinic, we went through her diet in slow, careful detail. I asked her to describe her mornings right down to the first sip of tea. The pattern was unmistakable. Every symptom she described, the bloating, the sour taste, the drained energy, arrived after that particular pairing. I explained gently that as we age, our stomach lining becomes thinner, more sensitive to acid overload. Lemon juice, with its citric acid added to the lactic acid in yogurt, was creating an environment her body could no longer tolerate. It wasn't poisoning her, but it was quietly eroding her comfort, stealing her energy little by little. Ava's eyes widened, a mixture of disbelief and curiosity. "So it's not the lemon and it's not the yogurt, it's them together?" I nodded. "Exactly. Separately, they can be nourishing. Together, in your stomach, they become too much." I could see the relief in her face, the way her shoulders softened. For weeks, she had been wondering if something more serious was lurking beneath these symptoms. Sometimes, knowledge alone is a kind of medicine. We made one simple change: no lemon with dairy. I suggested she try her yogurt with berries and honey and save the lemon for her tea after lunch. That evening, Ava called her daughter just to tell her the plan. "It's such a small thing," she said, "but I feel like I've been given a little map for my mornings." The next day, she woke up with a strange new feeling, not the heaviness she had grown used to, but a cautious sense of lightness, as though her body had been waiting for her to notice. 2 weeks later, Ava felt lighter in the mornings, her energy slowly returning. She could walk out to her roses without pausing halfway, and the sourness in her throat had all but vanished. But old habits have a way of slipping back in through side doors. One sunny afternoon, she joined a community lunch at the town hall. On the buffet table sat a bright spinach salad, dressed with olive oil and a generous squeeze of fresh lemon. It looked so fresh, so wholesome, she didn't hesitate to fill her plate. At first, she thought nothing of it. She chatted with friends, laughed over stories, and savored every bite. But that evening, a deep ache bloomed in her lower back, sharper than the garden cramp she'd felt weeks before. It radiated toward her side, making her shift uncomfortably on the couch. She drank water, thinking she might just be dehydrated, but the discomfort didn't budge. When she went to bed, it followed her like a stubborn shadow. The next day, the ache was joined by a subtle stiffness in her knees. It puzzled her. She hadn't overworked, hadn't fallen, hadn't done anything out of the ordinary. I still remember the way she described it to me in the clinic. "It's like my bones are tired, even though I'm not." When I asked what she'd eaten the day before, she recounted the lunch, her voice softening as she reached the part about the spinach and lemon. I explained that spinach, while rich in iron and vitamins, carries high levels of oxalates, natural compounds that bind to calcium in the body. When combined with lemon's citric acid, those oxalates are released in greater amounts. For younger, strong kidneys, it's rarely a problem. But for someone her age with naturally slower filtration, the excess can quietly strain the kidneys and rob the bones of calcium. I could see the realization flicker across her face. This might not be just a random ache. We agreed on a simple change. If she wanted spinach, she'd steam it to reduce oxalates and pair it with olive oil or nuts instead of lemon. The very next week, she made a spinach salad at home using the new method, and her body responded with gratitude. No ache, no stiffness, no lingering discomfort. She laughed when she told me, "I didn't know spinach could be so kind when it's treated right." For Ava, this wasn't just about one meal. It was another moment of awareness, the understanding that even the healthiest foods can become heavy burdens when combined the wrong way. It wasn't fear that guided her now, but curiosity. And with each change, she was learning to listen to her body's quiet signals before they grew into shouts. By early spring, Ava's days felt steadier. She had learned to keep her lemon and dairy apart, to soften the spinach's bite before it reached her plate. But life has its way of testing new habits. One Friday evening, her neighbor invited her over for dinner, a small gathering with pasta, salad, and a special dish she proudly called lemon garlic shrimp. The aroma alone was enough to make Ava's mouth water. They ate at a table lit by soft candlelight, laughter mingling with the clinking of forks. The shrimp was tender, the lemon sauce bright, and Ava savored every bite without a hint of hesitation. But later that night, as she settled into bed, a strange warmth spread across her face and neck. Her skin felt flushed, her heartbeat quickened, and a dull headache began to pulse at her temples. She sat up, trying to breathe through it, wondering if she was coming down with something. The symptoms passed by morning, but the memory lingered, especially when the same thing happened 2 weeks later at a seaside cafe, after another lemon seafood meal. This time, there was dizziness too, and a brief wave of nausea that made her grip the edge of the table until it eased. It wasn't dramatic enough for the ER, but it was unsettling. When Ava came to see me, I explained that certain seafood, especially shrimp, can naturally develop higher histamine levels if it's not absolutely fresh. Lemon, with its acidity, can accelerate the release of these compounds, and in sensitive bodies, that surge can mimic an allergic reaction. She looked startled. Her fork paused mid-air as we spoke. "So it's not just bad luck?" she asked quietly. "No," I said, "it's chemistry meeting timing." We decided she would still enjoy seafood, but with a simple rule. Skip the lemon unless she was certain of its freshness, and use herbs or olive oil for flavor instead. That weekend, she tried her neighbor's pasta again, this time with garlic, parsley, and a drizzle of good olive oil. No flushing, no headache, just an evening of easy conversation. For Ava, this was more than avoiding discomfort. It was the dawning of a new kind of trust in herself. She wasn't just taking advice, she was weaving it into her life, testing, adjusting, and noticing the difference. Each choice felt less like a restriction and more like an act of care, as if she were tending not just her roses, but the delicate garden inside her own body. Ava's kitchen counter had always been home to a small wicker basket of lemons, bright against the pale marble. For months, those lemons had been a source of both comfort and caution, reminders of the changes she'd had to make. But one afternoon, she stopped by the local market and spotted a stand selling freshly roasted chickpeas. The vendor offered her a sample, still warm in the paper cone, sprinkled with herbs and sea salt. That evening, she called me with a question. Could lemon work with these? Her voice carried a note of curiosity I hadn't heard since before her symptoms began. I told her that chickpeas, unlike spinach or dairy, actually welcomed lemon, that the vitamin C could help her body absorb the plant-based iron while easing digestion. It was the kind of pairing that worked with her body rather than against it. The next day, Ava set out to test it for herself. She made a simple salad of roasted chickpeas, fresh parsley, and a light lemon dressing. She ate it slowly, savoring the way the flavors came together. The tang of citrus brightening the nutty chickpeas, the freshness of the herbs lifting the whole dish. Hours later, she realized something remarkable. There was no heaviness, no sourness, no lingering discomfort. Instead, she felt energized, almost buoyant, as though her body had been waiting for this balance. Encouraged, Ava began weaving the combination into her weekly meals. Sometimes she added tomatoes and cucumbers. Other times, she tossed the chickpeas into a warm stew with a squeeze of lemon at the table. Each time, the result was the same: easy digestion, steady energy, and a quiet satisfaction that came from reclaiming a part of her diet she'd once approached with hesitation. I could see the change in her when she came in for her next checkup. Her cheeks had more color, her voice more brightness. "It's funny," she said. "I thought the lesson was to be afraid of lemon, but now I see it's about knowing its friends and its enemies." She smiled, tucking a stray curl behind her ear. That's when I realized that Ava's journey wasn't just about avoiding harm, it was about finding joy in the pairings that nourished her completely. One breezy Saturday morning, Ava wandered through the farmer's market, basket in hand, letting her eyes roam over the fresh produce. That's when she spotted a pile of broccoli crowns, their deep green florets catching the sunlight. She hadn't cooked much broccoli lately, it always felt a little plain to her, but something about their crisp freshness made her stop. As she reached for a few, she remembered our last conversation about lemon's gentle allies and wondered if this was another one. Back home, she called me, almost as if she were letting me in on a small secret. "What about lemon with broccoli?" she asked. I could hear the hope in her voice. I explained how lemon's acidity could actually help unlock broccoli's detoxifying compounds, boosting the body's natural defenses, especially for someone her age. It was one of those rare combinations where flavor and function worked in perfect harmony. That afternoon, Ava steamed the broccoli lightly, careful not to let it lose its color. She whisked together a simple dressing, fresh lemon juice, olive oil, and a pinch of black pepper, and poured it over the warm florets. The scent alone felt alive, bright, almost cleansing. She ate slowly, watching the light shift across her kitchen, and realized she was smiling without knowing it. The change wasn't dramatic like flipping a switch, but in the days that followed, Ava noticed her energy holding steady through the afternoon. There was no midday slump, no heaviness in her limbs. Even her evening walks felt easier, her breath more even. She joked that the roses seemed to grow faster when she was in a good mood, and lately she had more good days than not. When she visited again, Ava brought a small container of her lemon broccoli dish for me to taste. "It's like my body recognizes it," she said with quiet pride. And I could see it in the way she moved, lighter on her feet, more present in her own skin. Lemon was no longer just a cautionary ingredient in her life. It had become a companion she understood, one that could be trusted when paired with care. By late spring, Ava's kitchen had begun to feel like a small apothecary of her own making. Glass jars lined the counter, dried herbs, roasted chickpeas, bright lemons in a ceramic bowl. One morning, while leafing through a magazine, she spotted an article about turmeric tea. The image caught her eye, a steaming, golden drink, rich and warm, with a slice of lemon perched on the rim. She traced the picture with her fingertip, wondering if this could be the next chapter in her journey. She called me later that day, her voice carrying the same blend of curiosity and caution I'd come to recognize. "Would lemon work with turmeric?" she asked. I told her how the vitamin C in lemon could actually protect turmeric's curcumin, making it easier for her body to absorb, and how this pairing might ease inflammation in her joints. "It's worth a try," I said, "but start gently, listen to how your body responds." That evening, Ava warmed a cup of water, whisked in a spoonful of turmeric powder, and squeezed in fresh lemon juice. She added a hint of honey, stirring slowly, as if coaxing the flavors together. The first sip was earthy and bright all at once, the lemon lifting the turmeric's deep, grounding taste. She wrapped her hands around the mug, feeling the heat seep into her fingers. Over the next few weeks, the ritual became part of her mornings. She'd sip it after breakfast, sometimes by the window, sometimes in her garden. By the end of the second week, she noticed her knees didn't protest as much when she climbed the steps to her porch. The slow, stubborn ache in her wrists and the one that always came after pruning roses seemed softer, less insistent. One afternoon, as she knelt by her flower bed, she realized she hadn't reached for her old cane in days. She stood up without bracing herself, a little surprised, a little proud. When she told me at her next visit, her eyes shone. "It's like I've given my joints a little oiling," she laughed. And in that laugh, I heard something deeper, the sound of a woman reclaiming the ease in her own body, one thoughtful choice at a time. By summer, Ava's confidence in her choices had grown. She knew which foods welcomed lemon and which ones quietly turned against her. But there was still one habit she'd never questioned, her glass of warm lemon water first thing in the morning. She'd been doing it for over a decade, convinced it woke up her system. It felt almost ceremonial. Slice the lemon, squeeze it into the cup, breathe in the fresh scent before that first sip. One morning after finishing her drink, she felt a faint burn low in her chest, followed by a strange emptiness in her stomach. It passed quickly, so she ignored it. But a few days later, the same discomfort returned, and this time joined by a tight, restless feeling in her throat. It was subtle enough that she still went about her day, but by the end of the week, she caught herself avoiding breakfast because her stomach felt unsettled. When she mentioned it to me during a routine visit, I listened carefully. "Ava," I said, "the lemon itself isn't the problem, but drinking it on an empty stomach can be too strong for a lining that's more delicate now than it used to be." I explained how, as we age, the protective mucus in the stomach can thin, making it easier for acid to irritate the surface. "It's like watering a plant," I said. "Too much all at once without soil to absorb it can overwhelm the roots." The next morning, Ava tried a small change. She had a few bites of toast and a handful of berries before her lemon water. The difference was immediate. No burn, no heaviness, just the familiar brightness of citrus without the sting. She smiled into her cup, realizing how simple the solution had been all along. In the weeks that followed, she began to see this adjustment not as a restriction, but as another act of kindness toward herself. The habit was still hers, the warmth, the ritual, the scent, but now it left her feeling nourished rather than depleted. Sometimes, she thought, it wasn't about giving something up, but about learning when and how to let it in. By mid-July, Ava was in full bloom, her garden thriving, her steps lighter, her meals more mindful. But one hot afternoon, while visiting her daughter in the city, she was offered a tall, frosty green smoothie. It was a vivid shade of emerald, flecked with seeds and a bright wedge of lemon on top. "It's full of kale, spinach, and a splash of lemon. So good for you," her daughter said cheerfully. Ava took a sip. It was tangy, earthy, refreshing, the kind of drink that felt healthy just by looking at it. But that evening, she felt unusually tired, as if her body were moving through syrup. Her thinking seemed slower, her muscles heavier. The next day, the fatigue lingered, paired with a slight dizziness that made her pause before climbing the stairs. When she told me about it, we traced the ingredients together. Kale, spinach, beet greens, all high in oxalates, blended with lemon, which could make those oxalates more absorbable. And in Ava's case, there was another layer. She was on thyroid medication, and lemon's compounds, combined with the greens, could slow the way her liver processed it. "It's like your medicine got stuck in traffic," I explained gently. Ava's eyes widened. "I thought I was helping myself," she murmured, shaking her head. I reassured her the smoothie itself wasn't inherently bad, but timing mattered. We agreed she could still enjoy green smoothies, just without lemon if they were high in oxalates, and to keep them well away from her medication time. A week later, Ava tried a new blend: cucumber, parsley, pear, and mint, sipping it mid-morning after her pills had done their work. This time, there was no heaviness, no cloudiness, only a cool, steady energy that lasted the rest of the day. She realized then that healthy wasn't a one-size-fits-all promise. It was a conversation between her body and her choices, and she was finally learning to listen. August arrived with long, warm evenings, and Ava found herself spending more time on the porch, chatting with neighbors as the sun went down. One morning, she decided to add a little sparkle to her routine, her usual warm lemon water, followed by an early brush of her teeth before heading out for errands. It felt fresh, clean, and ready for the day, perfect. But a few weeks later, she noticed something odd in the mirror. Her front teeth looked just a little less bright, the edges more translucent than before. There was also a sudden twinge of sensitivity when she bit into cold fruit. At first, she blamed it on age. Wasn't that what everyone said happened over time? But the changes seemed too quick, almost as if they'd crept in overnight. When she told me, I asked her to describe her mornings in detail. As soon as she mentioned brushing right after her lemon water, the picture became clear. I explained how the acid from lemon temporarily softens the enamel, and brushing in that vulnerable window can wear it down, layer by layer. "It's like polishing a leaf while it's still wet," I told her. "You don't mean to damage it, but it bruises just the same." Ava looked startled, even a little disheartened. She'd always taken pride in her teeth, visiting the dentist regularly, keeping up her flossing. The idea that a simple timing mistake could undo years of care was a hard pill to swallow, but I reminded her that enamel loss can be slowed and that all she needed was a pause. Wait at least 45 minutes before brushing or rinse with water after lemon to neutralize the acid. She started the new habit the very next day. Lemon water, a quiet walk through the garden, maybe a few minutes reading by the window, then brushing. Within weeks, the sensitivity eased, and her smile began to feel like her own again. "It's strange," she said one morning, "how the smallest delays can save the things we value most." And in that moment, she wasn't just talking about her teeth. Looking back, Ava's journey was never about giving up lemon. It was about learning how to live with it in a way that honored her changing body. She began with quiet discomfort she didn't understand. The bloating after yogurt, the ache in her back after spinach salads, the flushed skin from shrimp dinners. Each moment felt small on its own, easy to dismiss, but together they were signals, asking her to pay attention. Her first transformation came when she realized that healthy wasn't always universal. By separating lemon from the foods that clashed with it, she not only eased her symptoms, but reclaimed her energy. Her mornings became lighter, her walks through the garden easier, her days less shadowed by discomfort. The second was deeper, a shift in how she approached her habits. Ava stopped treating routines as unchangeable truths and began treating them as living things, open to adjustment. She found joy in pairings that supported her, lemon with chickpeas, broccoli, turmeric, and learned to time her habits so they served her body instead of wearing it down. In doing so, she discovered a quiet power, the ability to listen, adapt, and protect her health without fear. If there's one lesson in Ava's story, it's that our bodies are always speaking to us, not in dramatic shouts, but in small, consistent whispers. When we pause to listen, we can find the balance between the foods we love and the care we need. So let today be the day you take notice. Look at your plate, your cup, your morning rituals, and ask, is this helping me, or is it time for a small change? Because sometimes the gentlest adjustments can open the door to your strongest, healthiest years ahead. And just like Ava, you deserve to walk through that door with ease, energy, and a smile that lasts. Mota Ava always thought lemon was her little daily miracle, the fresh splash in her yogurt, the tang on her spinach salad, the brightness in her shrimp dinners. But over time, those same habits began to leave her tired, bloated, and achy without her knowing why. What seemed like healthy choices were quietly working against her, and it took a few gentle but eye-opening changes to turn things around. In this heartfelt story, we follow Ava's journey from confusion to clarity, discovering the food combinations that drained her energy and the ones that brought it back. Along the way, you'll see how small shifts, like separating lemon from certain meals, choosing the right pairings, and timing daily habits, can ease discomfort, protect kidney and bone health, and even support healthy aging. These are simple steps that any senior can try without giving up the foods they love. If you've ever wondered whether your healthy routine is truly serving you, Ava's experience might be the nudge you need to listen more closely to your own body. Watch until the end to learn which lemon habits to keep, which to let go, and how the smallest adjustments can make the biggest difference. Mau, senior health tips, Asha healthy aging, while digestive health, on foods to avoid after 60, natural wellness, on nutrition for seniors, lemon mistakes, senior wellness, Kim. Ava's story shows how even healthy habits can surprise us when our bodies change with age. Have you ever noticed discomfort, fatigue, or strange symptoms after adding lemon, or any healthy food were to your meals? Share your story below. I read and reply to every comment, and your experience might help someone else find their answer too. Thumbnails. After 60, lemon plus. This food can hurt you, doctor's urgent warning.